Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Halal Gap. I'm your host, Sofia, Alani, and I'm joined by my co host, Sikandar, Atiq. If you guys have enjoyed our episodes of the Halal Gap so far and want to make sure not to miss the next one, please follow us on Apple, Spotify, and Stitcher and leave us a review. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe to our channel. We have an incredible guest joining us today. Take it away, Sikandar.
She is a photographer who is interested in how identity and community intersect with fashion and beauty to form a narrative. Inspired by the elegance, grace, and intimacy of Pakistani poetry and Islam, she hopes to create softness in an otherwise antagonistic world. She has been featured in Vogue India and the New York Times, and her client list includes the likes of Disney and Netflix. Joining us all the way from the Bay Area, please welcome Simrah Farrukh. Woohoo!
Hello.
Hello, hello. How's it going? First
Sorry.
of all, welcome, Salam. I know you're in the Bay Area, which has had some crazy storms recently. Are you like all good? Are you guys flooded out? What's the situation over there?
Yeah. Well, in my neighborhood, everything's good. There's just like small landslides on like the highways and freeways, and the Bay Area has never like really been flooded like this in a long time, so it's very different. And like we kind of need the rain because we're in a drought, but all at the same time, it's like it like came all at once. So yeah.
Yeah, you need the rain, but not that much and not altogether. Makes
Yeah.
sense. No, that I'm glad to hear that you're doing okay, and hopefully it stays that way. So with all of our guests, we like to start right at the beginning. So, what can you tell us about the Bratz America's Next Top Model competition?
Oh yeah. Um, so basically, I feel like my first memories of photography and like being into fashion, and this is more of a recent reflection. I haven't like really touched on this ever when like people ask me in interviews like how did you get started in photography? What interested you? It'd always be like I found like my dad's old film camera, and I always saw like people taking pictures at like weddings and stuff. But like I was reflecting a while ago and I realized that was actually my first encounter with photography was being on the start of YouTube and just the most random videos. Like while my friends were like into the actual America's Next Top Model, I was on YouTube and I found this weird like community that like put Bratz into that and like kind of made it a whole Bratz things, which are like dolls, if anybody out there doesn't know. And basically, they like dress their Bratz dolls up and take photos of them as if they were taking photos in America's Next Top Model, and like submitting those into competitions on YouTube. And then like these channels would always like feature all the different contestants that submitted their photos, and it'd be like a whole thing, and there'd be like a winner at the end. So that's kind of really how I got started in photography. Was I saw that and I was really interested in like telling a story about someone, and a doll was like the easiest way to do that. It gave you a lot of creativity and freedom, and they came with like tons of clothes, and you could literally just like go into your backyard and like put her next to a flower and like take photos like that. So I feel like that's really where my creativity and passion for photography really stemmed from. So that's like, yeah, one of my more recent like memories of photography.
So did it kind of start because like you love the dolls or you love the fashion aspect, or like how did that kind of all incorporate together?
Yeah, I think, well, also Bratz dolls are known for being very fashionable, and I feel like whenever I'd go to like stores and stuff like Target, I'd always go to the Bratz section. So and I feel like because they're so fashionable, it's like what caught my eye, and I think that's also what just got me into fashion photography and like the interest of fashion. And I feel like that interest has developed in different ways to not just like be fashion photography, but like incorporating fashion and style into different types of photography.
Sophia, was Bratz around when you were young, or is this like a
Yes.
recent
Excuse
addition?
me. I'm not as
I
old as
don't know.
you.
I've never played with Bratz. What do you want me to say? I was like doing research for this interview is like the first time that I heard of the
The
Bratz
Bratz
dolls.
dolls. They
Why are
were
they called
Oh,
Bratz?
because they had giant faces on their heads and then like tiny. It was just like, it was the style of their face makeup or like face like design, right, Simra? It was just like they had like these
Yeah.
giant eyes and like, yeah, it was
Like
like
they're
a very
just out
specific.
there. They're
Yeah,
like unapologetically
bratty.
brats. Yeah.
The
Yeah,
more you know, the more
right?
you
The
know.
more you learn. And I don't know, I actually don't recall though. I never played with brats. Like they were never a toy that I owned. But were there like brown or black or like not white brat dolls? Was that a thing?
Yep, so I think there's like 4 or 5. I think there's 4 main girls. It's Chloe, a white girl, Jade, an Asian girl, East Asian girl. There was Yasmin or Yasmin. We don't really know what she was. I'm assuming she was
Ethnically ambiguous
Persian.
Yasmin. I like it.
Yeah, and she had like a beauty mark, and she had like medium skin. And then there was a black Bratz doll named Sasha. So they actually had
That's
they
pretty
had
progressive.
inclusivity. Yeah,
That's
You know,
for
yeah.
they're
like the early 2000s or whatever that was. Like that's not
yeah,
terrible. That's
yeah.
some diversity there, considering I don't even know how long it took like Barbie to not just be a white girl. So,
Yeah,
you
exactly.
know. Nice. So, given that like that kind of thing and so and that photography with the dolls specifically, do you feel like that cuz you have a really big desire with your photography now to kind of touch on topics of like skin tone, colorism, representation. And so do you feel like you use the dolls at that point because of their diversity to do that or did that come later?
I feel like it came later, but I feel like that definitely like imprinted on me as a child because like when you're like 7 to like 9 years old, that's where like your brain is more the most impressionable, and like
Mhm.
even if you're consciously or unconsciously doing something, it's still going to impress your mind. Um, I feel like me playing with those dolls and like because I've always liked playing with like dolls that looked like me or as close to looking like me as
Yeah.
I could when I was at that age.
Yeah.
So I feel like just by doing that, it kind of had an effect on my like work in the long run, definitely.
But no, I was just gonna say, I mean, that kind of naturally progresses into some of the work that you did, like as Sophia mentioned more recently. And I know coming out of college, you did one of your first exhibits called the Brown Gaze. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that was all about?
Yeah. So that was my senior year of college in 2019. And basically, I had gone to Cal Poly University in my first year of college, and I transferred out of there as quick as I could because if you know anything about that school, it's not that diverse. And
Wait,
it was
which school
also
again? Sorry.
Cal Poly, San
Oh,
Luis
Cal Poly.
Obispo.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's in the middle of nowhere, really. It's really pretty, but it was also during 2016 elections,
Mm.
and that was also my first time being away from home and like in a different environment. I went to a predominantly white high school, but this was like different.
Mhm.
So I transferred out of there quickly and I went to LMU, Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles. And that's kind of where I found the South Asian community and connected with them and became like a part of that. And I started working with like all these different people who were it was also the time where like being an influencer was kind of growing, so there were a lot of more South Asian influencers coming into the picture. So they'd always reach out to me to work with me. So eventually I created this like large body of work that was surrounding South Asian culture, and just like the diaspora in LA. And so for my senior year, um, it's obviously my senior year, so I'm like graduating, kind of leaving LA, which I was forced to when COVID hit, but that's a whole different thing. So I created a whole gallery when I was offered the opportunity to do so, and it was on campus, and it comprised of around like 50 images of photos I had taken during my time in LA. And yeah, just like was a very special project for me because the people I photographed weren't just like random people that I like found like just on the streets. Like I kind of had a connection with them and like kind of more of like a like we became friends, and so that was there was just that like personal connection. Um that solo exhibition was very special to me because all the people in that exhibition were not just people I found on the streets. They were like people I met through Instagram or through like social events, and like we just became friends. So I had that very like personal connection to like everyone in the images. Um, and it was really cool because at that point, I had created like a pretty large following on Instagram, and there were so many people that followed my work that I've never met before. And those people that were following me, but were also in LA, they like came and showed up to my exhibit, and it was really cool to meet them in person and like see like the people that support me. And they were all telling me that it was very different to see my work on Instagram compared to like in real life. It's kind of like a whole different experience,
Mm.
obviously. Like, no matter how many times you see the image, when you see it in person, it's just like completely different. And I also had a couple of images that were like blown up very large, like mural prints. So it kind of had that like grander effect, which was really cool.
Yeah. So a couple of questions. I mean, number one, I'd like to love to learn more as to like why you chose the title of the Brown Gaze and what the kind of overall theme of the kind of the show was, like the gallery was, and then but something you just said as well that piqued my interest is just this idea of how right now we consume probably like the vast majority of our content through kind of a small cell phone screen on social media, and then like you mentioned taking ourselves out of that framework and into these large gallery spaces where you have an ability to do a mural. You talk a little bit as well about how as a creative, as a photographer more specifically, how conscious or potentially not you have to be around how you create work and how it's going to be consumed by whoever the audience is.
Hmm. Yeah, so for the first question, I chose the brown gaze for multiple reasons. I think the underlying reason was because being an art major, I had to take like art history classes as well. Um, but something I noticed throughout all my art history classes were that we were talking about like all the white artists for like the whole semester, and then there'd be like a week or two talking about like one black artist, and just the rest was like were like white artists. And even those white artists, like within our history, we talked about like the white gaze and the feminine gaze, the male gaze, things like that, and how you kind of like see the lens through predominantly males in this industry, because it's a male dominated industry, which it's now changing. But so I chose to do the brown gaze because obviously I am brown, and all of these images I created came through the purity of my lens without even thinking about like how white people would perceive these images. I think in the beginning of my work, before I even started college and I had the idea to create work around brown people, it was like, oh, like Islam has a really bad representation in the world, and I want to show the world that we're like a peaceful religion and we're peaceful people. But that slowly changed to being like, it doesn't matter what the world thinks. Like, I just want to create a safe space for Muslims, for brown people to feel seen and to feel accepted and to feel like we have a community. So that's also kind of how the brown gaze came to be, was like, this is for you guys, and doesn't matter what anyone else thinks, they can see the work, but this is for ultimately like the community I came from.
I think that's really cool, and I think that like it's super. I think it's just fascinating to think about like the ways in which we're all like unconsciously or subconsciously influenced by the male gaze, the white gaze, etc. So I think it's really, really cool that you highlighted that. And one of the things that you said in one of the interviews that you did was around creating that safe space, um, to kind of make sure that like, yeah, like it was safety and it was like kind of allyship and everything in that space, versus sometimes how, instead the space can be used for like violence or exploitation, and that's kind of historically been the case. And so, given your art history background too, can you talk a little bit more about like how that has happened? Like how often like subjects of photography and of art who are people of color, a lot of the time, like, yeah, it was like kind of to exploit them, to alienate them, to kind of like sometimes poke fun at them, like how that kind of influenced your decision too. And then we can get back to Sikandar's
Mhm.
other question because I realized
Yeah.
there were two there.
Yeah, I think a lot of the stuff we learned in art history, like the curriculum was very aware of the fact that, like, I'm just going to talk about like the Black community because that's what we were taught in the classes, and it was kind of like um, just like it was in America, so and it was when there were no brown people, so using Black community as a reference. In the curriculum, we talked a lot about how Black people were the subjects of like Orientalism or exploitation, and they were kind of used as subjects. So we were also taught in like photography classes that like using the word subject when referring to like a person or a model is kind of like almost derogatory in a sense because it's like you're objectifying them and making them an object to be seen. Um, so they were very aware of that. And in the classes, we learned a lot about how there were like Black people that were used as props in paintings. And they would have their own history, but no one ever really like dove into that, or no one really like knew their names, or there was like little information about them, like people knew their names, but we never actually like went into their history. We kind of just talked about the white artists themselves exploiting this Black person, and then we never talked about that Black person, which I really wish we did because that person had so much history and was like an important figure, historical figure.
Hmm.
So yeah, I feel like just realizing all of that and seeing that like people are used as props and as are seen as like objects to be seen, it kind of made me want to reclaim that. And you know, because I obviously know my community, the people I'm surrounded by, Islam, Muslims, South Asians. So I feel like I have that connection with them, and I feel like I can, when you're photographing people from your own community, it's like you know how to photograph them and what's okay and what's not okay. Whereas if you're like a white photographer, like for National Geographic, and you're going to like Pakistan to like photograph villages and stuff, like even though they may not have a like they may not have bad intentions, but overall what they're doing is kind of like exploitation and Orientalism, and they're the ones profiting off of brown people and like the people in the villages that they're photographing. So overall, I just wanted to like reclaim the lens, so to speak.
Yeah, I love that.
No, it's something we actually have a lot of conversations about as like with filmmakers more specifically, and something you just touched on also made me think about a conversation we've had a few times where, we talk about how historically, like you mentioned, in film more so, just kind of based on the context of our previous conversations, you have a lot of, like you mentioned, white directors or white producers who are making stories about whatever, black people, indigenous people, South Asian people, whatever the case is. And on the flip side, it's very much, if you are brown, if you are black, if you are indigenous, you are expected to only tell brown stories, indigenous stories, or black stories. What are your thoughts on that? As a South Asian, as a Muslim photographer, do you feel like um, do you feel like it's your responsibility to tell stories that are specific to you and your narrative, or are you comfortable exploring other, whether it's ethnic backgrounds, religious backgrounds, or different um, cultural stories that typically we've been kind of pigeonholed into telling just the one that we come from.
Hmm. That's interesting because as like a freelancer who whose history is making art and bodies of work around being South Asian, it's like I'm almost confined to that. So I feel like when clients reach out to me, it's for their diversity campaigns, and which is nice because I'm like, okay, like they're trying to like be more inclusive, bring more like South Asian and Muslim faces into like their branding, to normalize it. And like that's great and all, but then I also feel like that's all clients come to me for, is to showcase brown faces. And although that's like a goal of mine, I also don't want to be confined to do that for work. Like I can photograph all skin types, all races, all ethnicities, and I'm comfortable with doing so. Um, but like I noticed that I'm always asked to do or be part of a diversity
Yeah.
and inclusion campaign, and I'm like,
Yeah,
okay.
it's like such a tricky and delicate balance, I assume, right? Because on the one hand, obviously you want to fight to be able to tell those stories, but on the other hand, you don't want to be pigeonholed, I assume. Which,
Hmm.
again, there's no right or wrong answer. I don't think. Like, if someone wanted to just lean into being South Asian content, South Asian whatever photographer, filmmaker, whatever, just focusing on that, great. I mean, amazing. We need more of that. But certainly, I don't
Yeah.
think it should limit anyone to doing just what their background is.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, I mean, and this is where that, I guess, somewhat like controversial, touchy topic comes up, is like, we're kind of trying to tell white people the same thing on the other hand, right? Where it's like we want to be able to tell our stories, but also we want to be able to tell other stories as well. I don't know. I don't have a right or wrong answer to this. I just find it fascinating to kind of talk to creatives about that aspect, because it is something that
Hmm.
comes up a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you kind of have to take into account the power dynamics
100%.
and like colonization and all the like historical stuff there, cuz like I don't think you can separate it. Like it's not the same when white people make stories about other races like versus a black person making a story about brown people or vice versa. Like it's really just there's so much laden. But I actually had a question about that too, cuz like I remember like there recently, I think it was because of Moonlight, the movie, and because of how the cinematography was filming black skin, and like for the first time, like it was something that was like actually like done well, with in terms of the lighting and everything. And so was that like a thing that you like covered or learned about, and in terms of like how these practices of this art that again have historically maybe not been used for the best reasons have kind of focused on the even just the technical aspects of it being focused on like highlighting white skin, and like lighter skin tones, like how has that kind of come to play
Hmm.
in your work as
I
well?
never, they never touched on that in school, like how to light different skin tones. Um, the program at LMU was kind of smaller, so we didn't have that many, like a diverse range of classes, but that would have been a really cool class to have. I think I kind of, because I was aware of it, I kind of knew how and know how to photograph all skin types, and I always try my best to like learn different technical aspects that make sure that people are being photographed like the tone that they are. Um, and yeah, I think it would have been really helpful to also have a lighting class for that, for like other people to like learn about. I feel like it's not very normalized either, because even like Snapchat and Google, like they've been more recently doing projects to make the cameras like recognize, like on Snapchat, recognize darker skin so that the filters can appear on their faces. They're doing better to fix the aspects of the camera on the like Google phones so that they can like photograph darker skin better, like just on the iPhone itself. Um, so yeah, I kind of lost the question a little bit, but yeah.
All good. No worries.
What you were just saying, Simrah, just reminded me of the fact that like a friend of mine was the director on some like Apple commercials of like back in the early days of Siri, and she was talking about how they were trying to film this like Ramadan commercial for Siri, but they had like it targeted in India, and Siri couldn't even pick up an Indian accent, so it wasn't working. So yeah, there's it's always interesting to me when it's like how technology and inclusivity kind of oftentimes are at heads with each other until you have to find a way to overcome it. So yeah, I mean, I didn't even think about how like lighting and how cinematography is taught, and how, you know, being mindful that certain aspects of the, you know, whatever the photography process or the filmmaking process has a tilt towards fairer skin or a certain type of skin tone only. I mean, it's not all that surprising. It took like 100 years to get different colored band-aids, for God's sake. So, you know, we're gonna we're gonna probably come across these issues. But I digress. To go back to my earlier question, um, you know, and again, maybe you're just like, no, it's the same thing. But I'm curious to know: do you think about things differently when you know that the platform or the medium in which it's going to be conveyed is going to also be different? So, for example, like you said, when you're doing a gallery show versus doing portraits that you know are going to live predominantly on Instagram or on social media in some way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in the beginning of my, like when I moved to LA and I was working with all these different influencers and just meeting different like people from the South Asian community, I think because I was growing a large following and that's where like my community became like a thing, on Instagram, the app, I was really involved in like connecting with people on Instagram, and people would like message me and DM me and like tell me how like they feel very seen looking at my work, and they just feel like a connection and they resonate with my work so much. And it felt good to hear that because that's what the goal was to create a safe space for people and to just let us feel like we are being seen, even if it's from our own people. Um, and I think as technology like Instagram became progressive and they kind of just kept developing their app, and their whole thing is not like, obviously apps like this and platforms like this say it's for a community, but then they kind of get involved with like competing apps. And so I think because Instagram started changing, I think the whole dynamic of community on there also started changing, and it just started to feel like I couldn't connect with people as much anymore as I was. And I think also the whole idea with likes and getting like story views and stuff became a whole thing, even if I was like conscious of it or not. Like if I took a photo that I really, really liked and I posted it, and it would get less likes than some other photo that I didn't like think I put like my whole entire effort in, then I would kind of like be affected by that. And that was also very toxic, and it like it
Mhm.
started affecting me as a person and my work as an artist. And because like your art is an extension of who you are, I think, you know, those two things go hand in hand. Like if you're not like, I also started when I was like 19 or 18, and I think also at that age you're like comparing yourself to everyone and you're looking for approval and like self-worth, not self-worth but worth outside of you rather than self-worth. um and again, because art is an extension of who you are, I feel like my work was kind of, it was good and I really appreciate the work I created then, but I feel like the person I was when I was creating that work, it was a little shifty. And so this past year, I kind of digress from the question, but um,
No, take it wherever
this
you want to.
past year, this past year, I went off Instagram. I logged in like a few times, but for the most part, I just log in, post, log right off, because I feel like the app was very much changing and it became more of a video app, and my photos weren't being seen. So I felt like there was no use or point in posting if like people who used to resonate with my work can't see my work anymore. So I kind of just went off the grid. I still kind of am off the grid. And I feel like I'm just starting to get back into creating more work, and I can see that I have grown a lot as a person in these past couple of years, and I can now see that in my work. Even if other people can't see it, I feel it in my work, and I feel like that's the most important. And it was because I decided to
Mm-hmm.
go off Instagram and kind of realize that I want my work to be seen. Like, I want my work to be accessible, but also Instagram wasn't allowing me to have my content be accessible. So I started just thinking about how I can create work to be seen like more in person, and like steps I can take to get my work to be seen in person, like in galleries and museums one day. And yeah, so I feel like it's kind of all shifted for me from off Instagram and off viewing my images on a phone.
Yeah, no, that's it's so fascinating because I know in 2022, like when you started to kind of step away from Instagram a little bit, is also when you started to, I think, if I'm not mistaken, that's when you kind of really went full time into your freelance work. And I know that, Instagram, social media in general, is often like a pretty substantial tool that people would use as freelancers to try to drum up new business. So was that like kind of an internal conflict for you in terms of like, okay, well, this is something that I know is like eating away at my soul, which is like how I create art, but at the same time I kind of need it to try to drum up business? Or were you not reliant on that at all anyway?
Yeah, I think I became less reliant on it because it also then started to push me to get out of my comfort and like send cold emails and reach out to like creative directors, photo editors, things like that, and actually like network, which I wasn't able to do so confidently before. And I actually started using LinkedIn because apparently LinkedIn is very good for artists and photographers, because that's where all like the creative directors are for like companies. And if you want to work for
Totally.
like, just any company, you go on LinkedIn, you connect with whoever the creative director is, you send them a message. So I feel like the way I marketed myself and the way I am making sure my work is being seen is me having to step out of my comfort zone and like push myself. Because I'm also I was a very reserved, quiet person. I still kind of am, but I think photography has definitely made me grow out of my comfort zone in different ways. So, yeah.
Oh, it's amazing. And I think something that like we don't talk about much at all really is the fact that, as a freelancer, you are basically like an entrepreneur, right? Like you are essentially running your own business. How has that learning curve been for you? Like being someone who was strictly focused on the art to now trying to turn this into a full living.
Yeah. I think that was also a big learning curve for me, especially when tax season came around. So, it's a lot because no one teaches you this stuff in school either, which they should, because when they're they're like teaching you all the technical aspects of art and like all the creative stuff of art, but they never teach you how to survive in this world. And in this world, we all know how this world works. So
Mm-hmm.
we need those resources, but we didn't learn those resources. So it's been me just doing my own research, reaching out to like all my other freelance friends and seeing what they've been doing. Um, and it's kind of like you're learning how to, you're kind of more independent because you don't have like benefits or the 401k or like shares and stuff like that. You kind of have to do everything on your own. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, like to be financially literate, like you have to do all your own research and you don't have that security of, oh, my job has it covered because you're your own boss. And usually the employer pays the employees taxes and then the other half just gets taken out from their paycheck. But for freelancers, it's like you have to, because you're your own boss, you have to pay your own employee taxes and then on top of that like your own percentage of like income tax. So there's a lot to learn and I'm still learning, but yeah.
Yeah, that sounds super fun and
Yeah.
confusing a little bit. Damn, that's a lot. So, because I think that's really cool. I think like myself and every other human being I know could probably stand to like take a break from social media. So, I think that's like a really incredible thing to do, particularly when I think a lot of other people in your position are using that platform to like advance their careers. But I think it's very cool that like your break, I think, ended up coinciding with the development of so many skills that, you know, will help you like actually help to fortify your career, you know, inshallah, and like to that networking piece and that like you know, yeah, the just the personal finance, like understanding kind of that freelancing aspect of it too. I think that's really cool. um and do you feel like um that's because I think it's fascinating that you said that like other like the creative directors and folks like are on LinkedIn, because I don't know that a lot of people who are interested in photography that I know of anyway are like using that as a platform. Like I think a lot of people are still trying to like just get something that goes viral, or you know, like create content that kind of like piques interest. And as you said, that's like a real big algorithm game of like it's not necessarily the thing that you created that, you know, was something you're super proud of or something that was really close to your heart. It's like something that someone else kind of assigns that value to. So do you feel like this break has kind of helped you to assign your own value to your own work in terms of like what you're wanting to put out there? Or do you still feel like there are some, because I think in some situations there need to be those like outside influences of like what are the clients wanting, and or like what would get me kind of more exposure as a freelancer, or like what's kind of maybe
Yeah.
popular right now?
Um yeah, I think I still do have like the external kind of thing. I use Pinterest because Pinterest, you don't, there's no focus on likes or comments. It's kind of just like people are posting
Mm-hmm.
work and you can use those photos as like inspiration and things like that. And I think for me, that's much better because I don't see a photo and see how many likes they have and be like, oh, I have to recreate this photo so that my photo can get like the same amount of approval and likes. It's kind of just like, oh, this is nice, or oh, I don't
Mm-hmm.
really like this. Like, it's kind of like you're filtering out more what resonates with you and what doesn't resonate with you rather than being like, wow, this person has this photo on their profile. This person's really cool and I want to be like them and I want to get as many likes as them, things like that. So, yeah, I think I do have that, but in a different way, like minus the likes and stuff. And I think that's very helpful.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Because yeah, I think that's really cool, and I think that like that really creates an environment for your creativity to thrive, which is very very cool. Instead of like yeah, like the because I think it's hard when you live under capitalism to like let that
Mm-hmm.
be the thing that guides like the work you create or the jobs that you take, and stuff like that. So I think that's very cool.
Right on. Um, Something that Sophia just kind of brought up, but I've been kind of thinking about as well is, so I know you recently did the album art for Rajinder, which like amazing musician, amazing album. So what's the process like for you when you're trying to collaborate and balance between, you know, you as a photographer, your vision, your art, your style, and working with a client who is also an artist who has their own vision, their own style, and really at the end of the day, it's their album. So you talk to us a little bit about how that process goes in collaborating on these types of projects.
Mhm. Yeah, usually when people come to me, they always mention how they really like my style of work and how that's what they want kind of in whatever it is, like an album cover or like photos promoting their music, things like that. Um, so I feel like that's what they originally come to me for. So I'm like, okay, so they trust my vision, and then that kind of creates like a level of mutual understanding and trust between us. And then I kind of like Riginder, he sent me all of his whole album, like while it was like in the progress and things. I got to listen to it before anyone else, which is really cool. So I got to listen to the music and kind of get like a vibe of it. And then from there, he kind of like explained what the whole album was about and like what he wanted from it. But at the end of the day, he was like, I trust your vision, and that's why people come to me. So from that, I kind of sometimes I make a mood board, and sometimes I kind of just like go into it if I have like a close connection with the person, which with Briginder and um, someone else that I just recently worked with, Omer, they're both kind of like friends and acquaintances. So we kind of just went into the shoots and just did it without me really creating a mood board. It was more of like okay, I trust you, let's do this. But if it's someone I don't really know, then I usually create like a mood board and kind of take what they've told me and kind of just like put a visual into like a file, a PDF, so they can see kind of the direction we're gonna go in. And then from there, when we're actually shooting, it's kind of like we're referencing it, but we're not like physically like copying everything on that. It's kind of more for the feel and for like expressing a mood that we're kind of going for. So that's what like the whole process is like. Like it's very collaborative, and I like it to be that way because for me, it goes back to that whole thing of exploitation and using someone as a subject. When it's not collaborative, it kind of feels like that, but when it's collaborative, it's kind of like a team effort, and it's like
Yeah.
they're voicing their opinions and what they like and what they don't like.
No, that makes total sense. Do you feel like even in mainstream media that we're getting a little bit closer to sort of a more balanced and you know content representation that's not just through like the white gaze? Like I know you had a chance to work on both like the Miss Marvel red carpet shoot and I think you did some work for Never Have I Ever, and so like shows that are predominantly made, yes, within like major white studios, but by teams that are more reflective of like South Asian culture, Muslim culture. Do you think that there's been, at least, like, I know you're very relatively new in your career, but have you found that those strides are starting to come about more frequently now?
Yeah, I think so, and I'm kind of grateful that those are like my some of my first experiences because I know people have been in this game for like so long and they're just starting to see the shifts happen, and it's like very rewarding for them, and for like people that are more new to the industry like me, I like am grateful for like all those people who have been in it for the long run because they're the reason why these shifts are happening. So having this as my first experience, I think like sets the foundation for me that this is going to be the norm for me and I'm going to see more and more of it. Um, and I feel like to me it's starting to become normalized, but I feel like for someone else who again has been in it for a long time might like not see it as the norm yet just because they've been in it for longer. But
Yeah,
yeah.
their perspective is like generations of non-representation, and now coming into it, it's like, oh, there's a drop in the bucket. But yeah, no, it makes sense. So
Mhm.
with that in mind, like speaking of kind of influences and people who are kind of like gatekeepers for beyond or for like up and coming creatives, what can you tell me about Hanifa Harris and how she has impacted your career?
Yeah. Um, I met Hanifa through, well, she reached out to me, um, and it was kind of in a moment of my own life where I had just graduated university during the pandemic. I was more confused than someone who would have graduated like years before because they actually had like an open world, whereas I graduated in my kitchen, like on Zoom. So I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, and I think the world is ending, and I don't think I'm going to be a photographer anymore. Um, so that was kind of where I was. I couldn't even go out and shoot because I couldn't work from home. I could take photos of myself, which I did, but like you can only take so many photos of yourself. Um, and like you couldn't be on set, you couldn't go out and shoot with people. So I was very confined and didn't know the direction of my work. And as things slowly started opening back up, and I was also reflecting at that time how I've never had like a Pakistani or Muslim mentor before, and my work in college has always been about being South Asian, being Muslim, and all my professors have been white, and they were good professors and they helped me as much as they could, but ultimately, even they were like, I don't know how to help you, and I don't think I can help you. And I was like, yeah, I know, I'm going to do this by myself. So, having that whole mindset, I just got an email from Hanifa, and she was just like, um, hi, my name's, I don't even think she introduced herself. She was just like, hi, can we get on a call like later this week? And I saw her email was like from Netflix. So I was like, oh, very interesting. And so I just got on a call with her, and like that whole call was like life changing for me because it was like, wow, like she's Pakistani, she's Muslim, she's a photographer herself. She's been in the photography industry for years, and I feel like God's really doing something right now. So she brought me on to the Never Have I Ever season 2 shoot for Netflix, and I was like kind of shadowing the main photographer, and then I got to do my own like editorial work with my three, and that was like the first time I was like in this big production space, and I could see like the potential that my career had and the potential of just being in an environment where there's like South Asians and other people who are South Asian, like creating work alongside me. Um, and yeah, that was very exciting. And it was all because of Hanifa. And just throughout, it's been like a couple of years now. And just throughout these past couple of years, like she's always been very supportive, and she's always had like connections and networks and like kind of like guiding me through everything and like getting on catch up calls with me and stuff. And so I'm very grateful for her.
That's really cool. I think we have this conversation a few times on the podcast as well about like how there's maybe like an understanding that like because there's such limited space for people of color in these creative fields that like people would be a little more gatekeepy about it, but that's actually not the reality, and that there's actually so many people who are willing to kind of share their help and share their mentorship and everything. And is that something that like you think about in terms of like how you want to inspire other creatives?
Yeah, I think in these past couple of years, I felt like I was still growing as an artist and as a photographer and like finding my own way through it. But I think like you can never wait to be ready because then you're just going to always be waiting. So I feel
Mm-hmm.
like whatever information and resources and advice I can give people, like whatever it is, even if it's like little or a lot, I feel like it can help people in different ways. So I'm always open to it and open to sharing like any knowledge and things like that.
That's awesome. And one of the things you mentioned in terms of like, you can only take so many pictures of yourself. I actually had a question about like self portraits and kind of like if that's something that you do a lot, and if in the process of like your work with other folks who have brown skin, in terms of like creating a safe space for them and like highlighting kind of the beauty of that, like, is that something that you've been able to give to yourself through those things? Like, has taking self portraits and kind of being a photographer yourself like changed your self perception at all?
Yeah, it definitely has. I think I've been taking self portraits for like a long time, and I think during the pandemic, because I had no one else to model for me, I had to use myself and just explore and like grow my work that way. And I think once you like take an image of yourself and you kind of just like are editing like the colors and stuff, or if you're like editing out acne, whatever you want to do with your own self portrait, like the more you stare at your face, the more it just become you have like an existential like moment, like when you like look at your name for a long time and you're like just staring at it, and
Mhm.
then it just becomes
Yeah.
Like, what is
Like a
that?
unearthly.
bunch
Yeah.
of letters,
Yeah.
yeah, and you're like, "What is
Yeah,
this? How does this even mean
exactly.
me?" Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of like what it is when you're like taking self portraits and you just like stare at your face, and then you're like, this is, I don't know what's happening right now. I think it helped me to like see my own beauty and like appreciate my own features a lot more.
Mhm.
Because I was always self conscious of like my nose, which a lot of brown girls are. Um, and my senior thesis was actually on South Asian noses. Um,
Oh,
and I
cool.
was self conscious about like my forehead. So I had like bangs my whole life. Not my whole life, my whole teenage, not even my teenage life, my whole 20s so far have been bangs. And I feel like when I take pictures of myself, I can really just stare at my face and like appreciate it and
Mhm.
just like see my own face as like art almost and like a painting. So yeah, it's
Mhm.
been very helpful.
That's really beautiful. And I think too, like, one of the things that you said in an interview that I really loved was that, like, even when you're photographing like brown skin, and you try to kind of highlight like all the hues and like focus on darker skin tones as well, which I think is excellent. When you kind of said that, like, just the darker skin is like a statement in and of itself, like, it, even when you're not wearing the cultural clothes or the cultural jewelry or like anything like traditional, like, it's just a statement. And I thought that was like so profound, because I think that, like, it is a statement. And I think, we walk around in this world that is like built for white people as not white people, and kind of like, I've never thought of it in like that kind of like positive statement light. Like, I've always been like, oh, it's like, not a burden, but it's like a thing, it's like a potential risk to your safety, it's like a potential risk to like how people perceive you, and that being slightly negatively tinged and stuff. But I love the idea of it being a statement, instead of something negative. And I thought that was very cool. You're a very wise person. And so another thing that we did want to touch on was like, you kind of have a big focus on like femininity, and like focusing on femininity in your pieces. Can you kind of talk a little bit more about why that's important to you and what that journey has been like, and if you're gonna continue, because we know that you kind of, again, we've just stalked your interviews like nobody's business, so we know that you were also kind of talking about how you wanted to expand, beyond just South Asian representation of Muslims and stuff like that. So like, in that expansion, are you continuing with that focus on femininity still?
Yeah, I think femininity is like in everyone, no matter what gender, sexuality you identify as, everyone kind of has that femininity within them. So I feel
Mm-hmm.
like it's a universal thing that I can use across anyone that I'm photographing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think to me, it's kind of like photographing someone through a very like soft and pure lens, like something that really captures their true essence and like their inner selves. Um, and I like to explore it in like different ways. Like sometimes you don't really put softness with the word like bold or confident, because when you think of confident and bold, you think like very poppy, very like in your face, things like that. So I think I like to try to explore softness in different, I don't know, like feelings and identities and things like that. Um, and yeah, to me, it's just kind of like you can be soft and gentle while at the same time being like strong and grounded and stable.
Mm,
And that's kind of what I'm always exploring. Um, and then can you remind me the second part of the question?
I don't even know that I remember it, to be honest with you.
No, but I think generally the question is more so about like as you explore, your future work, right? Now as you move forward and Sophia mentioned that, South Asians have been kind of a focus of yours for the last little while. And I know that you're wanting
Yeah,
to expand that to be more inclusive of like Muslims more holistically, if I'm not mistaken. Can you talk to us a little bit about why that's been a conscious decision for you? And I think Sophia is quite, I don't want to speak for her, but I think she was also wondering if the femininity aspect of it was also going to continue to be there as you look
oh
to
yeah,
focus more on the Muslim community.
Yeah, thank you for
yeah,
being here, Sikandar. I appreciate you.
One of us has to pay attention here.
yeah, yeah. I think the femininity aspect is just part of who I am too. So I feel like it's just always going to be with me no matter who I'm photographing. And I feel like because Muslims and Islam have had such harsh and hard perceptions in media, I think what we truly are, like, we're all soft people. Islam is a very
Mhm.
soft and peaceful religion where you're connecting with like your inner self and with God. And that is a very, again, peaceful, soft thing in nature. So I feel like, yeah, just holistically photographing Muslims in that light and um, being more, I haven't really created work around Muslims purely yet. I've had like a few projects here and there, but I think that the work that I have created so far has had that softness. And I'm this Ramadan, I have like a whole project I want to do that also touches on like the softness and mysticism of Islam. And
Mm,
yeah, I think bringing in different identities within the Muslim community is going to be important to me because I also want to show that we're not just one race, one ethnicity in Islam. Like there are millions and millions of us from different places around the world. There's like converts, reverts, whatever. And like there's no one face to what it is to be Muslim. Like I think when you think of like I say the word like Indian, like you think that's all of South Asia, and you think of like one specific image, or like not us, but like like someone who's not Indian, they'll think of like a woman with like
Apu.
braided hair and like a bindi, yeah, and just like
Yeah.
whatever. So I'm trying to like help change that perception so that when you hear the word Muslim, you don't think of like one person image. It's
mhm,
kind of like more nuanced.
mhm,
Yeah, no, it's something that's come up quite a lot in our conversations is that the number one racial representation of Muslims in America are Black Muslims, which is definitely not what people would immediately assume, given the fact that South Asians and Arabs are typically the ones that will get the spotlight
Mhm.
in mainstream media or even in whatever representation that you're looking at, right? So no, it is fascinating, and it's something that we talk a lot about as the Mosquers, even, right, as an organization that's trying to be reflective of the kind of the wider Muslim community, and the fact that there are so many different sects, so many different racial and cultural representations within Islam that yeah, I am very much looking forward to seeing what work you put out to help change the perspective of the many faces of Muslims. So very, very interesting and very excited to see that. Um, okay, amazing. Sophia, do you have any last questions before we jump into our rapid fire? I know we're approaching an hour here, so
yeah, I actually just so you recently worked on a music video. And I just had a question about that process because something that you said was like mentioned like seeing the scenes that you're filming as photographs, and I found that super fascinating. I just like wondered, like, is that like, do you like storyboard a photograph and then like build the scenes in between those photographs, and that's how you like think of a concept for a video? Or is it like you'll do the video and then be like, okay, this is a still that I want to kind of capture to like tell the story? Like, which comes first, I guess?
Um, I think because that was one of my first music videos that I've filmed, um, and because he's like one of my friends, the whole like trusting aspect, like Simra, you do what you think is best kind of whole thing with that whole
Mm-hmm.
in play. I did do some like visual research about what I think would be very beautiful visually, but I didn't make out like a true storyboard. I kind of just went in shooting and whatever I saw in person, and I just kind of like liked it as a photograph. I kind of just filmed that as the clip. And then when it
Mm.
came to like putting it all together, the story and the visuals, like there were a lot of iterations of the music video. And so there wasn't like a set storyboard of this is what's going to happen and this is what's going to happen. It also kind of went along with like the song, and just, yeah, again, it was kind of like collaborative almost, like kind of listening to the song and seeing what the song had to say and then
Mm-hmm.
like putting in the pieces into that.
Very cool. Thank you.
I also had one more question that I totally forgot about, but it's okay if we don't have time. But I know generally that there's a lot of influence from poetry into your work. Can you talk just very briefly about how that interplays between, what would seemingly be two very different artistic mediums? How does it connect for you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that influence came from my dad because he's very into poetry, Sufism, mysticism, all of the arts, the culture. He's into all of that. So I kind of grew up with books from different poets like Faiz Ahmed Faiz, Ghalib, all of those, Iqbal, all of that has been an influence in my life, and I feel like it's added to the delicateness in my images and the softness in my images because I just find it so beautiful in the way that they say everything. And obviously, when you translate it to English, it's not always as beautiful as what it is in Urdu or Farsi or
Mm-hmm.
whatever language it is. So I feel like the next best way to translate those poems are visually into photographs or paintings, whatever medium. And I think because the way our brain processes images is like, I think like 60,000 times faster than text. So
Hmm.
I feel like just visually it does something like different to your brain. And it's like very euphoric and just like more beautiful than to translate it to English and being like, that does not make sense.
And it doesn't like capture what this
Yeah.
was trying to say. That's very cool.
So a picture is worth 1,000 words is like factually accurate. Is that what we're also learning today? Oh my goodness. It's a very educational hour for me. First Bratz dolls and now this. It's amazing. All right.
Really information you need to know.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't know that. It's great. Okay, amazing. Anything else, Sophia, or should we jump into our rapid fire?
Let's jump in. Let's do it.
Okay, Simra, I hope Asif gave you some fair warning, but we like to end our interviews with some totally random rapid fire questions. Are you down to humor us here?
Yes.
Okay, I'm very confident.
He
Yes, I
did not
like it.
tell me though.
Okay,
Asif, come
that's all right.
on.
It's okay. We'll have some fun here. All right, Sophia, take it away.
All right. Okay. First one. What is your most rewatched movie?
Um, Rugrats in Paris.
Oh my God. Absolutely. Is that one? It was like Raptar on Ice. Was that the one?
I
Were
think
they in Paris for that?
Maybe. I should know
Maybe. I
that.
don't even. It's okay. Still counts as your most rewatched.
All right, amazing. Second one. What is the first concert you ever attended?
First concert, I think it was either the 1975 or Atif Aslam. I don't remember which, but those are
Oh,
two
hell
very
yes.
different.
Wait, what was the first? What was the first band? You just cut it on my. It was Atif
The
Aslam, and what was the other one?
1970, the
Oh,
1975.
okay. Nice. All right. Okay, yeah, very different. I like it.
That's some range, though. Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, what is your most regrettable purchase?
Um, I think this thing, I'm looking at it now, it like you just turn a button on and it looks like the what was that game everyone was obsessed with where it's like you are on a ship and you're like it starts with
Oh,
an
oh,
A.
oh.
Among Us.
Among
Yeah,
Us, yeah.
yeah, yeah,
It
Yeah.
looks it's not supposed to be an Among Us character, but it kind of looks like it and it just has a circle in it and you just press it and it has like different aura lights and I never use it. So I think that.
Do you want
Sounds
to
cool
tell
though.
us how expensive it was?
I think it was $50 because it came from
That's not
Japan
bad.
also. So then I had to pay for shipping on top of the 50.
Oh
So
man.
yeah.
I mean, listen, like if you bought it during COVID, I feel like it's a totally justifiable purchase because Among Us was just everywhere. Psychologically, it was just pushing you towards that purchase. So makes
It was
total
this
sense in my
past
books.
year. So
You know what? I tried to give you an out. You didn't take it. That's not my fault. All right.
Appreciate the honesty.
Yeah. Okay. What is your favorite Zayn Malik song?
um I don't even remember the words. I kind of just listened to his album and his voice. Like
See,
that's how I am with
Asif.
him. Like I love
Uh,
him, but
yeah, Asif was like, she's a big Zayn Malik fan. She tweets about him a lot. I think this would be a good question. Clearly, we need to do more research. But that's all right. You know what? Just his general aura. Is that the answer?
yeah, a very
He's
beautiful
just
All
got
right.
a
person.
great voice. Yeah.
Mhm.
Beautiful person, beautiful voice. 10 out of 10. Agreed. Okay, and the last question, your favorite way to eat potatoes?
Mashed potatoes.
Nice. Excellent
Solid
choice.
answer.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. Simra, thank you so much for your time with
Of
us
course.
today. Where can people find you and your work?
Um, I don't really use Instagram anymore, but it's just my full name. My website is also just simrahfarrukh.com. I have a Twitter. You could follow me, but I don't really use it as a photography thing. I just like to humor myself. So I think that's
And tweet
also
about
my full
Zane.
name. Yeah. That's also my full name, but there's an extra R in my last name because Simrah Farrukh with two R's was taken.
All
You
right,
gotta
3 R's
find
it
that
is. Yeah.
person. Yeah. You gotta find
Yeah.
that person. Be like, excuse me. Is this your real name even?
And if you are a creative director, you can find her on LinkedIn, which we found is
Oh yeah.
also a fantastic tool. There you go. There you go. Awesome. Again, thank you so much, Simra. This was a
Yeah, thank
blast.
you.
Awesome.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode of The Halal Gap. Stay tuned for more episodes and follow our brand new Instagram page at @thehalal_gap. The Halal Gap is a Mosquers production. You can find the Mosquers on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok by searching Mosquers Film Festival. Thank you to our sound and video editor, Vikram Chouhan, our tile artist, Narmeen Saiyed, our researcher, Zaid Hassan, and our producer, Asif Quraishi. Please rate us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. And if you have any questions or comments about our podcast, you can email asif@themosquers.com. On behalf of Sikandar and myself, thank you for joining us. Catch you next time.